Thank you, Peter, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. What a fantastic 12 months it's been for Australian football, from our best ever performance at a Men's World Cup with the Socceroos to hosting the biggest and best ever Women's World Cup, to the best ever performance of a national team in the Matildas, to the amount of government interest, commercial interest for the game. We're in a really good spot, and I'm very proud that towards the end of the year of 2023 we're also able to make this announcement today. And of course this is an important announcement. It is a landmark, certainly in my view and the view of Football Australia, our board, our executive team, that we're here today to announce the 8 founding members of the national second tier. That's the main point for us being here. We're very excited about that. But we're also happy to talk about where the second tier is going and how it fits into the broader ecosystem of Australian football. So it really ends what I believe to be probably the biggest year in Australian football's history, the year 2023, and it ends with a big announcement about the second tier. We're here to speak a little bit, and I want to do that initially, about where we've come from, because there have been a lot of calls and a lot of debate over the past 5 or 6 years about creating a second tier. There's been lots of good work that's been done from different bodies within the industry, and I want to also take this moment to acknowledge the AAFC and Nick Galatas in particular for the work that's been done by the AAFC in terms of the advocacy, but also the white paper that was developed. We've done a lot of work internally. We've tried to make it a collaborative process and really work together with potential clubs, with member federations, with stakeholders to bring a concept together that we think can not only work but will also be viable and sustainable for many years into the future. I want to touch a little bit on the process because I think that's really important, how we got here today. And the real work, so the concrete work, I would say, started 18 months ago. We developed several different models on what different competition formats could look like and when those competitions could start. This was done in consultation with many of the clubs that are here today. It was done in consultation with our member federations, and we brought different experts from around the world to help us put together what the second tier is going to look like when it kicks off in March, April 2025. We started off with an expression of interest in February this year. That closed in March, and we had 32 clubs from New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland, Northern New South Wales, ACT, Tasmania, South Australia and Western Australia. Then we moved into the RFP phase in June. 26 clubs moved into the RFP phase, and that concluded in August. The third stage was the assessment and review phase. That meant that we went through and we evaluated, I should say, all the submissions, and this has concluded recently, and it culminates now with a kick-off in March or April 2025 with 8 founding members. This process was extensive and it was deliberate. We worked very closely with BDO, who we also appreciate the work of and who are here today, and that's how we got here today. I want to talk about the importance of the national second tier because it's not just a competition, and I think when I came back here 4 years ago and we talked a lot about what clubs were in the Australian football ecosystem, the common term that I heard was that clubs are participants. They're participants. They participate in competitions. What's really important to us is the way we look at clubs, or the way we're looking at clubs today. And for me, clubs are actually drivers. They're drivers of development. They're drivers of game development. They're drivers of the economy. They're not just participants. And I really want to stress that point as we kick off the second tier. Clubs are drivers. They're not just participants in the Australian game. And to that extent, before we got here, we haven't introduced different club mechanisms that put clubs right at the centre of the ecosystem as drivers. We've got a club licensing framework that exists today. We've introduced different transfer system policies. Again, these systems are really designed to put clubs at the very centre of the ecosystem as drivers. So this is not just a second-tier competition. I think this is more of a reflection of how we see the club's role within the ecosystem, and also how we connect the different levels of the competition here in Australia. So with that in mind, it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to the 8 founding clubs, and I'd like to share a video to introduce you to these clubs. Thank you.
A journey spanning decades. A dream turning into reality. Today, we stand at the threshold of a new chapter in Australian football. The national second tier is set to redefine the beautiful game in Australia. Witness the inception of a legacy as we unveil the initial foundation clubs. Apia Leichhardt FC, from the vibrant community of Leichhardt in Sydney's inner west. Avondale FC, representing one of the fastest growing regions in Australia. Marconi Stallions FC, proudly supported by a membership base of over 36,000. Preston Lions FC, from Victoria's northern suburbs, is poised to add a new chapter to its illustrious history. South Melbourne FC, globally recognised as Oceania Club of the Century. Sydney Olympic FC. Sydney Olympic FC enters the NST supported by strong community programs and partnerships. Sydney United 58 FC, runner-up in the Australia Cup in 2022. Wollongong Wolves FC represents a territory comprised of over 20,000 players across 108 clubs. 8 clubs, 8 stories, united by one dream. A competition that celebrates our national passion, resilience, and the unyielding spirit of Australian football. A new era begins. Kick off in 2025. Join us as these clubs carve their paths in the annals of Australian football history. Football Australia, united for the game, ready for the future.
So ladies and gentlemen, we're very happy to announce the 8 clubs: Apia Leichhardt, Avondale, Marconi Stallions, Preston Lions, South Melbourne, Sydney Olympic, Sydney United FC and Wollongong Wolves FC. So congratulations to the 8 clubs. We're very much looking forward to both welcoming you but also working with you over the next 12 to 15 months. Just before I stop speaking, I just want to mention a couple of strategic points that are related to this announcement today. First of all, in 2020, we developed a vision that we called the 11 Principles. And I think if you go back and look at a lot of what we talked about in that vision, you're seeing it coming to life at the moment. 2 strong national teams in the market, hosting major tournaments, connecting our national teams to the community. But also the phase we're moving into is making sure we can get our club football right. And this is significant, but it's also very aligned with the 11 Principles vision that we put out in 2020. We'll talk to the clubs more about the process going forward, but I did want to say that we're looking for an additional 2 to 4 clubs as we move towards the kickoff in 2025. So there will be an ongoing process for additional clubs. There's a lot of competition for these places, and we thought with a little bit of extra time, we're going to get some additional bids to enter this competition, because we have already 8 outstanding bids in the 8 clubs that are here today. So what that means in terms of a competition format when we kick off in 2025 is it will be a 10 or a 12 team competition. It will be home and away plus a final series that will kick off. It's an ideal time in 2025 to kick the second tier off, and that's also because an important part of establishing the second tier is that we're able to put it on a media platform. We are at this stage in a media rights process as we speak, where we're selling the Matildas content, the Socceroos content. We have acquired the Asian Football Confederation national team rights, and together with IMG, we have acquired the Women's World Cup rights in 2027. So the second tier competition will be part of the package that we're selling, and also our current deal expires at the end of 2024. And given this legal kickoff early 2025 and our new broadcast deal will start in 2025, we believe it's a really important time. As we prepare for kickoff, we've got a lot of work to do: branding, broadcast, we've got commercial work, we've got to work with the clubs to make sure the clubs are all ready to go both on and off the pitch. The clubs will continue to participate in the member federation NPL competitions until the second tier kicks off. What we also want to do, because we're creating an ecosystem, is also introduce some enhancements both on the men's and women's sides with the NPL competition. So what we're exploring right now actually is we're exploring a Champions League and a playoff series at the back end of the 2024 NPL men's season, and the same format at the back end of the 2025 NPL season for the women. And why we're doing this, and I want to bring it back to the objective, we're competing with big nations around the world, and it's not just England and Germany and Italy anymore. We're competing with countries like Japan and Saudi Arabia. And if we want to lift our standards and we want to continue to be a leader even in our own confederation, we need more clubs across the country. Japan have 60 odd professional clubs, Saudi Arabia have 32. So the introduction of the 8 teams as a second tier, the clubs we already have in the A-League, and the enhancements to the third tier, which will be the NPL, is really important for the broader game. In closing, I just wanted to say that we are extremely excited to make this announcement. We're excited to work with the 8 founding members. We're ready to embrace more change to Australian football as we get into the new year in 2024, and we're very excited for the national second tier to kick off in 2025. Thank you for being with us today, the 8 founding clubs, other representatives of member federations, our media, and also my team at Football Australia. Good afternoon, and we're excited for what lies ahead. Thank you very much.
All right, we'll open the floor to questions. Just when we come to media, if you can raise your hand, say your name and where you're from, and then whom you're addressing the question to. Just use the microphone in doing so. Joey, I know this is your passion project, so we'll lead off with you.
Cool. Joey Lynch, ESPN. Question for James. Congratulations on launching the NST, looking at the participatory clubs, and I'm looking at the reaction already to the news. It's been noted that they're all from New South Wales and Victoria. What are the odds that the 2 or 4 extra clubs that you add before it starts come from outside those geographic regions?
Yeah, look, there's obviously an additional 2 to 4 positions available before the competition kicks off. I think what was important for us is we made a conscious and deliberate decision to ensure that the standard sat somewhere between the current NPL and also the A-League. So ultimately, the first priority was getting the best clubs together as we could. Those 8 are here today, and that was the priority. What I can say is other clubs that have been involved in both the EOI and RFP, there are some very strong bids from outside New South Wales and Victoria, and we're very excited to see who those 2 to 4 clubs will be when the competition kicks off in 25.
And as a follow-up again, does this competition launch with any kind of roadmap towards interlinking it with either the NPL competitions below it or the A-Leagues above it, or both?
Well, look, I don't want to get into the promotion relegation discussion. That's another conversation that I'm sure will come up at another point in time. That's not what we're here to discuss today, but certainly having alignment within the club football ecosystem is really important. I'll give you an example. While we may not connect the second tier to the A-League immediately, what is important is for clubs that would like to hold on to players, sign contracts for longer periods, which means an increase in value of the transfer value of a squad. There may be ways to align through transfer windows so that players can effectively be loaned between two tiers. I think we've got to look at it broader than just promotion relegation. It's about alignment of windows, alignment of movement of players, and that's something we'll be looking at over the next 12 months as we lead into the kick-off in 2025.
Paletti from the Inner Sanctum. Questions for Natalie. We saw after last year's Australia Cup that there were some very heavy sanctions levied against Sydney United 58. Will those sanctions, suspended sanctions, should they carry over to the new competition? And is there any sort of potential impact regarding Sydney United's place in the NPL, in the national second tier, depending on what happens throughout the NPL season with the fan base?
Sure. So each of the clubs that we're working with will need to maintain and uphold the standards that we've set for the second tier. We've been very upfront and transparent with those standards, and so throughout the next season of competition, that will include compliance within their member federation NPL competitions and ensuring that they align with the CPA and the club licensing standards that we'll bring into play. So if they have fulfilled those elements, if they've fulfilled those criteria, then they will be ready and able to join the second tier in 2025.
Francesca from SBS. Does this open up the potential for a second tier women's com as well?
Yeah, look, we've considered that, and we've put a lot of investment, a lot of time and resources into women's football during my tenure, particularly at the national team level, and we do want to do that at the second tier. So men's and women's club football are at different stages. We're focused on the second tier kick-off for the men's, but also, as I mentioned, introducing a Champions League model for the third tier, which will be the NPL. The first step for us in terms of investment into club women's football, which we've thought a lot about, would be the establishment of a Champions League for the NPL. That's going to be our focus. We'd like to introduce the Champions League for the NPL by the end of the 2025 NPL season, which means that the top clubs from around the country are playing in a potential league format. At the back end of a season, it means more matches for our women. It means more opportunities for our women coaches. It means more opportunities for our women's referees. So that's been part of this broader consideration of how we lift the level of the club ecosystem.
And just to follow up, part of the reason the A-League was created was to move football away from those old ethnic rivalries that hindered football's growth in Australia. Is this an admission it was wrong to lose those clubs from the elite football level?
No, there's no admission at all. I think this is actually a progressive move. I think if you look around the world, a club like Manchester City, for example, they're a club that look very different today than what they did 20 years ago. For me, this means that it's an opportunity for clubs that have a lot of history in the game, that have a high opportunity to grow and develop, have that opportunity. We're going to push the clubs, not because we want to be difficult, but because we want the clubs to grow and evolve, and also bridge this gap between the NPL and the A-League. That's really the objective. I see it as a very positive thing for Australian football.
Question for either James or Natalie, whoever's best suited to answer it, but one of the biggest questions about this entire process has always been, how do you pay for it? And I guess as a two-parter, what will be the costs associated for the clubs taking part in this national second tier, and how do you pay for it? How do you make the money for it?
Natalie normally takes difficult questions. I'll start with the easy stuff, then pass over. If we talk about the business model of the competition, there's really three main revenue streams that we've got to look at. The first is sponsorship. So how can we sell sponsors as a league? And then, of course, the clubs also need to sell sponsors locally as well. The second is broadcast. Now, I don't expect the league to generate broadcast to start off with. It's more around making sure that it's produced, it's visible, and it has as much reach as possible. And if we can get that right, it's going to help the clubs with sponsorship as well. Third area is it's match day revenue. So it's getting bums on seats, it's selling tickets, it's getting into the community and making sure that the community is engaged with the clubs. I think there's a big opportunity because the competition is played during the winter. We're the biggest participant sport in the country. There's lots of players kids that are playing week in, week out for clubs. My kids play at Leichhardt Saints. I'm sure they'll be here to watch RPA Leichhardt after they play because the competition window will be aligned. But that's the model. Do you want to go into some specifics about clubs?
Sure. Yeah, I think for us, one of the crucial parts of the assessment process was to ensure that the clubs that are selected do have the financial capability to sustain this competition in the short, medium, and the long term. So we did a significant amount of work with the clubs and with BDO to assess financial status of each club, both historical and future projections, based on the second tier information that we provided to them and our projections, our model. So the 8 clubs that you see here today have undergone a thorough process, and the expectation will be that we've provided the proposed costs. They understand what that means for them in terms of participation fee, in terms of potential roster payments, all of the elements that go into a competition, so that they now have 12 to 15 months to align with those projections, to secure those sponsorships, to increase those membership numbers, increase match day ticket sales, club merchandise, etc. And then we start off the league very strong in 2025.
James, is there a salary cap for this?
Look, we're going to work through. I'd prefer to frame it as financial regulation because I think that gives us more scope. We've got to work through that over the next months. That'll be a discussion that we'll have together with the clubs around how, on one hand, we allow clubs to spend, but spend within their means. But also create a level, I think, of competitiveness. Now, I wouldn't go as far as saying a salary cap. I think it will be more around how, through club licensing, can we ensure that we keep the clubs through a regulatory instrument in a safe position financially. That'll be a focus. What that looks like, I think we'll have a process that defines an outcome because we don't have a specific financial regulation model in mind at this point.
And also, you said in the press release talking about a refined application process for the extra 2 to 4 clubs. So will it be a slightly different application process for them?
I can speak to that. So the intent with this subsequent application process is that it remains as consistent as possible for those additional 2 to 4 clubs. So the proposals, the documentation, all of those elements will be consistent with what the 8 clubs sitting here submitted today. And it will just be the timelines that are refined so that we can work through that starting in early 2024 and have clarity as soon as possible while giving those additional clubs sufficient time to prepare their proposals and then start preparations for 2025.
Did you know when you'd want to announce them? Is there a deadline by which point you need
We don't
to?
have a confirmed deadline at this time. We'll provide those updates, I would say, in the coming weeks in terms of that process and the defined end date.
Teo Pellizzeri. Do you have prescribed rules for the state federations, so these departing clubs, what's left behind, be it a vacancy that a team is promoted into, be it a 23s team, and has perhaps the situation with Sunshine Coast and what they have publicly released been an obstruction to admitting a Queensland team initially before the next 2 to 4 licences are issued?
We absolutely have had discussions with member federations on this topic and will continue to have those discussions moving forward. It's a crucial element for us. We obviously want to ensure that we're enhancing, increasing opportunities, that we're promoting the ecosystem, promoting the pathways, and putting both the second tier clubs and the NPL clubs in the best position possible to succeed. So that's certainly a priority for us to solidify each of those elements as it relates to 2025, knowing that we now have more than enough time in 2024 to get to those results with each member fed.
And forgive such a specific question, but to the best of my knowledge, 2025 would be the first year since 1961 that South Melbourne has competed in a division that didn't have at least one of Knights or Heidelberg. So how important is it that when you dangle the carrot of 2 to 4 more licences from a crowds, from a rivalry, from a history point of view, that you're hoping that Knights and Heidelberg come around and actually submit a bid for a licence?
We will assess each proposal as they are submitted against the evaluation criteria that have been established.
It's a great question. Great answer there.
Sorry, Simon Hill, Network 10. Just to get some clarification around, I know there's obviously not going to be promotion relegation with the A-League as yet. Is there going to be relegation from the NSD to the NPL? And also as a rejoinder to that, are the clubs that are involved in the NST going to be allowed to field teams in the NPL as well, or not?
I'll answer the second question first, Simon. Yes is the answer, and we'll be encouraging that, but as Natalie said, we have to work through that with the member federations. Look, on the question about connecting the period, I mean, we want to connect the period. This is important for us, but it's a long journey, and I think taking this issue from a conceptual level to on the ground, you need to start implementing, and the first step is implementing a structure that sits in between the NPL and the A-League. There is no immediate plans to connect the NPL to the second tier, but I think one day there certainly will be. And you could even see by the other point we discussed about the NPL and creating a Champions League, we want to grow that level of the pyramid as well. And if we can have 3 strong levels, and I'm talking the men's side here for the time being, you have the NPL, which is your third tier. It's a regionally based competition that comes together at the end of a season to compete at national level. You then have a second tier competition that's played 10 or 12 teams home and away. That conversation about connecting those two at the right time is much easily had than what it is right now, given that second tier doesn't exist. So not on the table at the moment, but it's something that I think we can talk about at a later point in time.
Regarding, again, the A-Leagues, it won't be connected via promotion relegation, but have you had discussions with the APL about things such as a League Cup format or anything like that, given that I know Socceroos coach Graham Arnold is consistently bemoaning the lack of football being played and we need more games? That would seem a very easy way of adding more games. And secondly, how will this affect the Australia Cup and how you assign places in that competition? Does it just expand to a round of 64 and all the NS teams get an automatic bid? How will this affect that?
Australia Cup I can take you up, so that'll be part of the next few months as well as we consult with all of the relevant stakeholders in terms of format, slot allocation, etc. But certainly anticipate the second tier clubs having a prime spot in that competition as we finalise for 2025.
Just on the first question, Joey, so what we talk to the A-Leagues about is, number one, transfer system matters, which is highly relevant to a second tier, and that's all around contract length, it's around potential loan opportunities throughout a season, both up and down a period, but that means we've got to get the next point, which is the calendar right. So the challenge for Australian football, I think, going forward is the A-League is not played at the same time of year as the second tier. Now, that is a challenge on one hand, it's an opportunity on the other, because there's not a lot of top tier sports played over the summer here in Australia, so we understand that point. But I think what we need to get right in terms of calendar is registration windows, transfer windows, because if we want young Australian players who perhaps aren't getting the amount of time that they deserve at the A-League level, perhaps there's an opportunity to play at the second tier, and vice versa. If a club in this room has an outstanding 18, 19-year-old, 20, 23-year-old, and they want to maintain the registration rights because they want to keep the transfer value, they can send the player up the line on loan. So these are the opportunities, I think, the alignment on calendar works. The other area we talk to the clubs about at the A-League level is club licensing. And what we wanted to do through club licensing is have 3 layers of licensing: NPL, second tier that we're introducing, and also the A-League. So it's very clear to clubs what the standards are as you participate playing in high levels of that pyramid. You know, whether that's financial, it's infrastructure, it's your playing squad, it's your commercial matters. We want it to be there, set out in very clear and unambiguous terms that this is what is required to compete at this level at the different levels of the Australian football pyramid.
And you touched on the regulatory framework in an answer to Tom, and you've mentioned this will have a youth development focus, this national second tier. Will there be, or are there discussions surrounding things such as requirements for under 23 players, under 20 players, foreign player limits within the NST. What is the status of those plans?
Do you want me to? Yeah. Look, this is all under consideration, of course. I think it's a little bit early to say what exactly this will be, but there'll be times to discuss that with the clubs. So it's going to be important to us. But I think if we go back to what the objective of the second tier was, it's really to ensure that clubs like these 8 are able to grow and they don't have a glass ceiling over their head. That's important to us. It's important that we have more young Australians getting more time at a higher level. It's to ensure that we've got club officials who are developing through another level of professional clubs, referees, coaches. It adds a whole new opportunity for our stakeholders to grow and develop, and that's important to us. And I think when we develop these rules in consultation with the clubs, these sort of objectives, we'll be putting on the table.
One of the things that was noted, during this entire process was, Western Australia, South Australia, Tasmania. In terms of Tasmania, South Hobart, how close were they to being part of today?
We won't touch on specific clubs who were not ultimately selected, given that we will have an additional process that is forthcoming in the coming months, so can perhaps answer that in a few months' time.
And then just as a follow-up, one of the criteria was high-quality matchday stadia for 12 months of the year. Does that simply mean pitch conditions? Does that mean media facilities, locker room facilities? And does that mean every pitch has to be turf, or will synthetic be allowed for 2025 when the competition launches?
Sure. When we speak about infrastructure standards, we mean the entirety of the infrastructure. So the elements you touched on, broadcast, lighting, media facilities, corporate function spaces, change rooms, etc. So all of that will be outlined in the club licensing standards, and the clubs will work to elevate various elements of their infrastructure, and that also includes their training facilities as well for both senior and youth teams.
Last one. Oh, sorry, no, you haven't.
Jack Snape from The Guardian. Congratulations on the announcement today. How much financial risk does this new competition pose for Football Australia? What kind of participation fees are you asking of the clubs? And 2, 3, 4 years down the line, how does Football Australia see the financials of this competition?
Yeah, look, I think whenever you introduce a new mechanism or initiative in any business, there is a level of risk. Our risk in this case is calculated. We've done a lot of work, particularly over the past 18 months. It's no different to when we decided to invest in the Matildas. I mean, today you see the Matildas, they're arguably the strongest sporting brand and most valuable in the country today. 4 years ago, this wasn't the case. So it meant that we had to invest and we were taking on risk, and that's no different to the second tier today. What I will say is it does require some initial investment from our side, of course, all the modelling that's been done to putting in place a team, and that is also the case with the clubs. But we're very confident that it's calculated. We're very confident it will be a good business decision for Football Australia and the clubs, particularly over the medium term. What's really important now, when you want to build a brand like the Matildas or build a product like the second tier, we've got to market it. We've got to make sure that it's visible on TV, hence the discussion about a broadcast deal that will start in 2025. We need to make sure that it's deeply connected to the community. That's why we're playing in the winter, because we have the biggest participation base in the country. We need to make sure, and this is where we need to work with the clubs, that people are coming to games. And we think, given that each of these clubs are deeply rooted in community, given these clubs are playing at the same time of year as our community football, that these clubs will have no problems with getting people in the stadiums, and we'll be there to support, and that's going to build the product and reduce the risk over time.
Just on the TV rights situation, given that football is now the single record-holding broadcast in the nation's history, when you package up the premium products like Matildas and Socceroos, maybe with an Australia Cup, which is where it's at, and then a new competition like this one, do you have a desired target in mind as far as a mix of free-to-air and subscription service, or is nothing off the table given the technological developments that might happen over the next 2 years?
Yeah, good question. Look, the first thing is we shifted to Network 10 3 years ago, and I do want to say for the record, we're very happy with that agreement. The national teams, which this current deal for us is focused on, has had more, we've had more eyeballs, we've had more promotion than our national teams has ever before, and that's helped us building the brands. So I do want to put that on record. We're very happy with our current deal. What we're looking for in the next agreement is a good balance between reach and also cash so that we can reinvest into football. That's really important, and getting that balance right is always, I think, the trick. But what I can say is there's a lot of interest out there for the rights at the moment. One, because it's a very unique package. You've got two national team brands that are the flavour of the month at the moment. We're going into a cycle where we've got the Women's Asian Cup, for example, that will be played, and we have a very good opportunity to host that competition here in Australia. I'm very confident we'll get those hosting rights. Packaging up, so AFC national team rights, Women's World Cup rights, all bundled together. The Australian market's never quite seen a package like this before, and I think introducing the second tier as part of that package, it's going to help the second tier, because we're going to be able to leverage the strength of that package going forward. So I think we'll land a good deal. I'm expecting a record financial deal. I'll be very clear about that, and I'll maintain that position. But we also want the reach as well, because the reach is what's going to allow the game to continue to develop over the coming years if people are able to watch our competitions and our national teams from far and abroad.